the purpose of this is to introduce what everybody more or less accepts as draconian legislation. I notice that the Minister says, well, it would be impracticable to have to bring in new legislation every time because this is a global pandemic. But her own party leader, the Taoiseach and Minister for Enterprise, has pointed out that, of course, Ireland is completely out of kilter with every other European state. So I suppose my question would be, well, how's the pandemic different in Ireland to every other country? It's only different insofar as we have been more draconian with our restrictions. And frankly, those draconian restrictions have failed. Because at the end of it all, our detection figures are the same as they are in Sweden, where they had. And I'm not saying Sweden is the perfect model, but I am pointing out that there are no closures of bars in Sweden. There was no lockdown in Sweden. There are no closures of bars, in fact, in any other country in Europe. But we have these really draconian measures, and they've manifestly failed. Or else the figures being provided by NEFIT on a daily basis are incorrect. And I don't for a moment believe that the figures being provided by NEFIT on a daily basis are incorrect. I believe that they are correct, and I believe that our figures are higher than in other countries because the strategy that we have pursued is failing, has failed, and is failing. And I don't say that with any joy. It's quite sad that given the sacrifices that people made in good faith, they cancelled foreign holidays. They were told foreign holidays are the great evil, must be avoided. Yet, countries where they didn't do that are not having the same detection figures, but we are. So we have these really draconian restrictions, which have served no apparent purpose, because our transmission figures are higher than in other countries. Of course, we have failed to deal with the real clusters. Direct provision centres, I understand there's a discussion in NEFIT about that, but that it was advised by senior figures in NEFIT to others that, you can't raise that would be politically sensitive. So we won't look at we won't look at the direct provision centres. We won't look at the meat plants because, they keep the show rolling here. They finance, God knows what they finance, but they clearly finance something. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been left do their own thing when bars were being hammered. So we're all agreed that even the bars themselves seem to have now bought in to this policy of the beatings will continue until morale improves, which is effectively what this piece of legislation is about, that we'll introduce more and more and more draconian legislation, make it harder and harder and harder. The guards, the ASTI, have expressed reservations about it. Ordinary rank-and-file Gardaí across the state don't want it. They have said it's going to bring on Garda Síochána into disrepute. They have a job to do, and it's not to focus exclusively on bars as the government might have them do, because we have to scapegoat somebody for the failure of government policy. So we're going to bring it in, but we're going to have a provision where it will be rolled over. Does anybody in this House really believe that it won't be rolled over after November? Do they? Minister, do you believe, in reply to this, that this won't be rolled over, that you won't be putting down an amendment in a few weeks' time to roll it over? Because I know it's going to be rolled over, because that's the nature of giving powers to organisations. It's the nature of bringing in draconian legislation with sunset clauses that aren't really sunset clauses. They stay on the books forever. We had a long debate it wasn't in this House, it was in a different House. I did say before this House rose that it sets, I think, a terrible example that we're all sitting here, 1, 2, 3, what, about 20 of us, at what cost? And we're asking teachers to go back into schools, and thankfully they are going back into schools, and thankfully, and it's a huge credit to this government, and in particular to teachers, boards of management and parents across the country, that we have got our schools open again. But this is not an example to set to anybody. So that's why I don't think that we should be saying that we're going to roll over this legislation, because it is unnecessary. The only possible basis for it is, look, if we can swallow this one more piece of medicine, we'll open the bars. Now, this isn't about bars, or to me it's not just about bars, it's about society. It's about rural Ireland, which is dying on its feet. Young people can't meet anywhere. They can't meet in bars, can't meet in nightclubs, can't meet in weddings. can't even go to matches. So where will they meet? Well, of course, they'll meet where we don't think they should meet, because they are social animals. We're all social animals. We need to meet. We need a sense of community. And as a colleague that I spoke to recently said, who's from Kerry, as it happens, he said, he lives in Dublin. He said, God, I really hadn't realised. I went down to Kerry for the first time because of COVID, etc. I went down to Kerry for the first time recently in months and months, and I just couldn't believe the sense of isolation, desolation, and desperation that's there. Because people, we are destroying communities. We're destroying a sense of community. We're destroying a sense of society. And with that, we're doing untold damage to people's health, to people's mental health, to people's sense of well-being, to people's sense of optimism. And it has to end. It has to come to an end at some point. And the logical point for it to come to an end is when the power is given to the Minister for Health in the emergency legislation, which I voted for, don't regret voting for. I think it's been slightly abused, mind you, but I expected it might be slightly abused. I wasn't, unfortunately, disappointed in that regard. But I know the Minister for Health is going to put down a motion carrying on these powers, because that's what government departments do. They never relinquish power. And I know that the Minister for Justice is going to seek to roll over this legislation. And I don't believe that we can continue to roll over draconian legislation, which is having... I'm not a COVID denier. It is a very serious virus. It has killed people in this country. It will kill more people in this country. Everybody needs to be careful. They need to be cautious. But at some point, we as legislators in this House will have to trust people and say to them, be responsible. For God's sake, look after yourself. Look after your family members. Look after those with whom you come in contact. But we can't continue to do that through coercive criminal legislation. Not without destroying society, not without destroying individuals. It cannot continue indefinitely.
Thank you, Deputy.
So on that basis, I urge the Minister to put a proper sunset clause in place, a date after which these powers will not continue, especially given that any closure order made cannot be challenged. And Minister, you said you fudged it about how you challenge if a pub is closed for a day. And as I said earlier, this is a lot more than about pubs, but it is also about pubs in accordance to the long title. If it's closed for a day, how do you challenge it? You challenge it by way of judicial review. Are you seriously telling me that the 6,000 or so publicans that are shut down, that are on their knees, that are now having their payment reduced, some of them, that they're going to take a judicial review, that they're going to hire a solicitor and a junior counsel and a senior counsel and go to the High Court and pay the tens of thousands of euros necessary to challenge their closure for a day? Of course they're not. But then that closure for a day is going to be used against them when they're going to seek to renew their licence. So these are draconian powers. These powers are having an effect on people, on society, and they have to come to an end at some point.